Hello, I'm Emily Rhodes, and today I'm going to be talking to you about this book, Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. It's an excellent book and an excellent way to begin 2026. I'm really excited to be sharing it with you as part of Emily's Walking Book Club. We walk and talk once a month, well, in fact, twice a month, but you only have to come once. So you can choose Regent's Park or Hampstead Heath. We also have a Zoom option, and you can also get our weekly updates on Emily's Walking Book Club substack.com, where you can find loads of links to loads more about the book. Can't wait to talk about this book with you on our walks, on our Zoom, or do leave me a comment if you can't make it along. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know it's a book that many people dearly love. So, what is this book? It's set just sort of soon after the Second World War, and I think what's kind of fascinating and really brings colour to the book is the setting of post-war London. This feeling that, the church is still full of bomb damage and no one can remember what cream looks like. And getting some meat for dinner is this occasion to ask someone round because it's so rare to have a joint. Um, so there's this wonderful setting of post-war London, and the other post-war situation is that there were not that many men around, really sadly, and rather a lot of women. And this book is very much about Mildred, great name, Mildred Lathbury, who is an excellent woman, and we see various other women in the book too, some of whom are excellent and some of whom are rather less excellent. Um, I'm not sure how you describe them. And I thought I would try and give you a bit of a sense of what makes these women so excellent. Oh, I can hear Alfie having a little sneeze down there. Bless you, Alfie. um, so, so the book begins. So I think you get quite a lot just from the very first sentence. um, this is how it begins, okay? Ah, you ladies, always on the spot when there's something happening. The voice belonged to Mr. Mallet, one of our churchwardens, and its roguish tone made me start guiltily, almost as if I had no right to be discovered outside my own front door. So, you ladies, you excellent women, are always around when there's something happening. And what's happening, it's not some huge events, a sort of assassination or a bomb or some kind of crazy happening. It's simply someone moving in. It's the presence of a furniture van. Um, but in a way, it kind of is a bomb in Mildred's life because her new neighbour is um, Mrs. Napier, whose rather kind of roguish husband, Rocky, Rockingham or Rocky Napier is will be joining her soon. He was away in the Navy in Italy during the war. He's sort of on his way back. And in fact, this links rather nicely to Naples 44, our next pick. But Mrs. Napier is very much not an excellent woman. And from the start, we really get this contrast between Mildred, who's just there, mostly because she doesn't really have that much else to do. She works part time. She is always helping out at the church. She's incredibly neighbourly. She's literally defined as a neighbour. The first time we see her is watching her neighbour move in. She's just around and watching things and lending a hand. She's endlessly pouring out cups of tea. She's always happy to help, whether that's do the washing up or hem a curtain. Um, and we discover that her part time job is the care of elderly gentlewomen. And somewhere or another, she says it's a cause that she's that's very close to her heart, because she feels as though she's on the path to becoming one herself. A kind of she grew up in a rectory. She has some means, but her life isn't really going anywhere. It's falling. She doesn't really have much to look forward to. Um, One way that, and okay, so Mrs. Napier, on the other hand, is an anthropologist, like Pym herself, and is a complete slut around the home. You know, she can't cook, she can't tidy, she always leaves the washing up. You know, the opposite to this, and she's quite sort of selfish and driven, and is working, and has just a completely different approach to life to Mildred. And we get this contrast from the off. And one way I think that Pym really captures Mildred's predicament in a way is through her clothes. So the first time Mildred meets Mrs. Napier is by the by the rubbish bins, and this is what she says. She says, this is on page 3, so again, really near the start. We were, superficially at any rate, a very unlikely pair to become friendly. She, so that's Mrs. Napier, was fair-haired and pretty, gaily dressed in corduroy trousers and a bright jersey, while I, mousy and rather plain anyway, drew attention to these qualities with my shapeless overall and old fawn skirt. Then there's this brilliant aside. Let me hasten to add that I'm not at all like Jane Eyre, who must have given hope to so many plain women who tell their stories in the first person, nor have I ever thought of myself as being like her. So she's plain, she's sort of badly dressed, and she's not even like Jane Eyre, you know, there's no hope. Whereas, you know, we've got this pretty person with great clothes, and there's another sort of non-excellent woman who enters the fray quite soon, called Allegra Gray, you know, suspicious name if ever, who's also dresses rather wonderfully, and is shown to be a wrong 'un very quickly. So there are these two kind of rogue women, Allegra Gray and Mrs. Napier, and then there are sort of hosts of excellent women. But we feel that Mildred is somehow in the camp of being an excellent woman, but she's not that happy there. She, in fact, the reason I'm wearing this lipstick is because there's a wonderful moment where she rather defiantly goes out and buys a Hawaiian Fire shade of lipstick. And she's really trying to change herself through her clothes. She goes shopping with her friend Dora Caldecott, and tells Dora, you know, they shouldn't really be wearing brown dresses. Brown doesn't suit one over the age of 30. And why doesn't she try a green dress instead? And Dora's like, oh no, how terrible. I'm just going to get this dress a size larger. And towards the end, in fact, there's a great moment where she puts on, she tries to sort of signify change in herself through wearing different clothes. She says, my normal appearance is very ordinary and my clothes rather uninteresting, but the new dress I had bought showed an attempt, perhaps misguided, to make myself look different. It was black, a colour I had never worn before except when I was in mourning after my parents' death. I had often seen Helena, that's Mrs. Napier, in black, but her fair hair and complexion set it off better than my mousy colouring, and she had the knack of enlivening it with some brilliant touch of colour or important jewel, as one was told to do in the women's magazines. I had no important jewels, except for a good cameo brooch which had belonged to my grandmother. So I fastened this at the front of the little collar, brushed my hair back rather more severely than usual, and then brilliantly, as I was going out of the house, I met Miss Statham walking towards the church. Hello, dear, she said, peering at me with a doubtful expression on her face. What have you done to your hair? She asked at last. I don't know, I said feebly. Nothing really. So there's this, she's become this kind of spinster, and she's not quite willing to accept it. She really wants to change. And I think what's so clever of Pym here is that it's not easy to know how one should be as a woman after the war, because actually so much about Mildred is wonderful. You know, she's so kind and so helpful, and she's a really strong force. You know, she's got this, there's a line somewhere where, you know, she's very good at small talk, and there's a line somewhere, hang on, am I going to find it now? It's something like, oh blimey, sorry, I thought I'd put the page down. She says something like, you know, I could talk about anything, whether that's or in any situation, whether that's, you know, someone having died, or it's suddenly raining at the church fete. You know, she's reliable, and you feel she's always going to do her best to put you at her ease. She's endlessly pouring out tea. But there is this sort of terrible moment when she's really calling it all into question as the book goes on. She's like, is this enough? You know, what am I doing with my life? Like, why is adventure never really happening to her? But then we see Helena Napier and we see Allegra Gray, and we don't much like them. They might be anthropologists, or beautiful, or snaring all the men. But I don't think Mildred much wants to be like them. So, you know, she might put on the lipstick, but how can she be? You know, how is she going to be happy? What's she going to do? There's a great moment. Gosh, sorry, I'm just seeing if I've written down this quote. Sorry, I thought I had done this. It's sort of okay. I am actually going to try and find this because it's very good. It's towards, so she's always making tea. Okay, here we go. Got it. She's endlessly making cups of tea and sort of panics if the tea is a bit too weak. But then there's this moment again, quite near the end. She begins the chapter. Perhaps there can be too much making of cups of tea, I thought, as I watched Miss Statham filling the heavy teapot. We had all had our supper, or were supposed to have had it, and were met together to discuss the arrangements for the Christmas bazaar. Did we really need a cup of tea? I even said as much to Miss Statham, and she looked at me with a hurt, almost angry look. Do we need tea? She echoed. But, Miss Lathbury... She sounded puzzled and distressed, and I began to realise that my question had struck at something deep and fundamental. It was the kind of question that starts a landslide in the mind. You know, how can you even ask if we need tea when that is the life of these women, the life of this English world after the war, where occasionally you might have a glass of wine at lunch, but really it's all about endlessly making tea for every situation. Do we need tea? Oh my God, how can you even ask it? It's absolutely brilliant. And hopefully from the bits I've read out, you can see that in this quite complicated picture of women, whether it's you know, these different types of women slightly struggling to find their place after the war. There isn't really a perfect role model, and Mildred's really trying to figure it out for herself, how she can really truly be an excellent woman in a way that means that excellent is meaningful to herself, not just to society. But in this complicated portrait, I think what gives the book the extra brilliance is Pym's wonderful humour. You know, the way her tone, it's kind of gentle, but it's slightly arch. It's, you know, she's kind of with Mildred Lathbury, but also slightly laughing at her and her world, but in a kind way. It never feels, to me, it never feels too much. And I love it. I love the affection for Mildred, and I really feel for her. She's trying her best. She doesn't really. She's a bit lost, and it's very hard to find your way. And I think, although of course this is set in the 50s, it's a completely different time. I do think that still rings true, for anyone. Any human, man, woman, child, adult. Really, we are trying, I suppose, to be excellent and figuring out what excellence is. Is it being more like Helena Napier and not worrying about the washing up and going off to do really interesting work and wearing bright jerseys? Or is it being kind and always being ready with a cup of tea or a pot of tea? Um, what is that excellence, and how do we find our way to it? And perhaps the answer is to be ready to laugh at the situation, to, rather than despair, laugh. Perhaps the answer is, in fact, go shopping and buy some different clothes, or scrape your hair back, do something different with your hair, or in fact wear, your Hawaiian Fire lipstick. I will leave it to you to decide um, your path to excellence. But I'm really looking forward to sharing our thoughts on this excellent novel, which I think is such a great portrait of a time and place and type of person. Something very specific, but through that specificity, we find something that really, hopefully, we can all connect to and find something really quite universal there. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts.